There comes a moment in life when the heart grows tired, not because it has loved too much, but because it has been used too often. Some people do not enter your life to walk beside you. They arrive carrying empty hands and endless needs, feeding on your kindness while giving nothing back except temporary words and shallow promises. And the painful truth is this: the purest souls are usually the last to notice they are being drained. They call it loyalty. They call it patience. They call it understanding. But deep inside, something begins to ache. A quiet voice whispers that love should not feel like constant sacrifice, that friendship should not leave you exhausted, and that respect should not disappear the moment you stop serving others. Today, we are going to uncover the signs that expose those who use people for their own benefit. Because once you learn to recognize these truths, you stop begging for appreciation and start protecting the peace your soul deserves. There is a powerful difference between someone loving your soul and someone simply loving what you can do for them. Real love does not measure your value by your usefulness. It does not disappear when you are tired, struggling, or unable to give more of yourself. True connection sees the human being before it sees the benefit. But people who use others often wear affection like a borrowed coat. It looks warm from a distance, yet the moment your usefulness fades, so does their attention. And many good-hearted people miss this truth because they are too busy trying to keep everyone else comfortable. Some people only call when their world is falling apart. They only remember your kindness when they need help carrying their burdens. You become the person they lean on, cry to, depend on, and ask favors from. Yet somehow your pain is treated like an interruption. When your heart is heavy, they suddenly become distant. When your needs rise to the surface, they grow unavailable. That is not love. That is convenience dressed in emotional language. Real care does not vanish the moment the spotlight turns away from their needs. There are relationships where one person is constantly pouring, while the other is endlessly receiving. At first, it may feel noble to sacrifice your time, your energy, and your peace for someone you care about. You convince yourself that love means enduring exhaustion, but slowly, almost invisibly, you begin to disappear inside the relationship. Your happiness becomes secondary, your boundaries become negotiable, your worth becomes attached to how much you can provide. And the frightening part is that users rarely announce themselves loudly. They reveal themselves quietly through patterns repeated over time. Watch carefully how someone treats you when you can no longer offer them something. The moment you say no, the moment you choose rest, the moment you stop fixing every problem, their behavior often changes. Warmth turns cold. Patience turns into irritation. They may try to guilt you, manipulate you, or make you feel selfish for protecting your own peace. Why? Because some people become angry when they lose access to the version of you that benefited them endlessly. But anyone who truly values your heart will never punish you for having limits. A healthy relationship should feel like two souls walking beside each other, not one person carrying the entire emotional weight while the other rides comfortably on their kindness. Love is not built on constant taking. It is built on mutual care, respect, presence, and gratitude. The people who genuinely love you will not only stand beside you in your brightest moments, but they will also remain when you have nothing left to give except your honesty and your humanity. Never forget this truth. Your kindness is precious, but it is not meant to become a doorway for exploitation. You were not created to spend your life earning love through sacrifice alone. The moment you understand the difference between being appreciated and merely being useful, you begin reclaiming pieces of yourself that were slowly handed away to people who only loved the convenience of your giving. And there is something deeply freeing about realizing that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect. There are people who will stand near you during your storms, not because they truly care about your healing, but because they are curious about your weakness. At first, their presence may feel comforting, They speak soft words, offer quick advice, and make promises that sound sincere. But fake support has a strange emptiness to it. It comforts only enough to keep you dependent, never enough to help you truly rise. And many people fail to recognize this because loneliness can make even shallow attention feel meaningful. Some individuals support you only when your pain makes them feel important. They enjoy being needed more than they enjoy seeing you become strong. Notice how certain people react when you begin healing, growing, or becoming independent. Instead of celebrating your progress, their energy changes. Their encouragement becomes weaker, their excitement fades. Sometimes they even remind you of your past mistakes, subtly pulling you backward just as you begin moving forward. A person with pure intentions wants to see you win, even if your success means you no longer rely on them for survival. Fake support often hides itself inside performance. These are the people who know exactly what to say when others are watching. In public, they appear caring, loyal, and generous. They speak as though they would do anything for you, but behind closed doors, their actions tell another story. They disappear when your struggles become inconvenient. They offer sympathy without effort, promises without consistency, and advice without genuine understanding. Their concern sounds beautiful, but it rarely carries real sacrifice. One of the clearest signs of hidden intentions is when someone constantly reminds you of everything they have done for you. Genuine kindness does not keep score. Real support is given from the heart, not used later as emotional leverage. But people who secretly use others often treat every favor like an investment. They help you, then quietly expect control, loyalty, attention, or obedience in return. And the moment you stop giving them what they want, they make you feel guilty for every act of kindness they once offered freely. What looked like support was actually a transaction waiting to collect payment. There is also a painful truth many people learn too late. Some people stay close to your wounds because wounded people are easier to control. When your confidence is low, you are less likely to question disrespect. When your spirit is broken, you may accept crumbs and call it love. That is why manipulators often become uncomfortable when you rediscover your strength. Your healing threatens the power they quietly held over your emotions. But never let false support convince you that genuine people do not exist. Real support feels different. It brings peace instead of confusion. It respects your dignity instead of feeding on your vulnerability. A sincere person does not secretly compete with your growth or benefit from your pain. They stand beside you with honesty, even when no audience is watching. They do not help you to control you. They help you because your well-being matters to them. The older and wiser you become, the more you realize that not everyone clapping for you is cheering for your soul. Some people applaud only when your life remains small enough for them to influence, and that is why protecting your energy is necessary. Learn to pay attention not only to words, but to patterns, because hidden intentions always reveal themselves eventually, especially when your heart finally learns the courage to see people as they truly are, not merely as you hoped they would be. There is a deep loneliness that comes from realizing someone only remembers your existence when they need something from you. The phone stays silent for days, sometimes weeks, but the moment their world begins to shake, suddenly your name returns to their lips. They reach out with urgency, wrapped in sweetness. Their words sound warm, their tone sounds caring, and for a moment you believe the connection still holds meaning. But over time, painful patterns begin to emerge. Their presence is temporary, appearing only in seasons where your energy, your resources, your comfort, or your support can serve their immediate needs. People who use others rarely invest in relationships consistently. They treat human connection like a convenience store, visiting only when they require emotional relief, financial help, attention, or validation. When life is good for them, they drift away without explanation. They forget your struggles, your dreams, and even your existence. But the moment they face heartbreak, failure, loneliness, or difficulty, They return expecting immediate access to your kindness. And because compassionate people naturally want to help, they often ignore the imbalance for far too long. One of the saddest things about being used is how it slowly trains a person to mistake being needed for being loved. You begin to feel valuable only when solving problems for others. You answer every late night call, carry every emotional burden, and sacrifice your own peace because somewhere inside you hope your loyalty will finally earn genuine care. But real relationships are not built only in moments of crisis. True connection exists in ordinary days too. It remembers you even when there is nothing to gain from you. Watch closely how someone behaves when you are the one in need. Do they suddenly become busy? Do your messages go unanswered while you once moved mountains for them? Do they offer excuses instead of presence? Many users expect endless compassion from others while giving the bare minimum in return. They know how to receive support beautifully, but they struggle to offer the same depth when your heart is breaking. Their concern is often shallow because their attachment was never rooted in mutual love. It was rooted in access. Sometimes people become so skilled at taking that they do not even recognize the damage they cause. They convince themselves that their occasional affection is enough to balance years of emotional absence. They return with apologies, compliments, and temporary closeness whenever they sense you pulling away. But patterns speak louder than promises. Someone who values you consistently will not only seek you during emergencies, they will check on your soul when life is quiet. They will celebrate your happiness, not just lean on you during their pain. There comes a moment when the heart grows exhausted from always being the safe place for people who never truly become a safe place in return. You begin to realize that constant giving without reciprocity creates emptiness. No matter how kind you are, it is not your responsibility to keep rescuing those who only visit your life when they are thirsty. Your compassion should not become a permanent shelter for people unwilling to care for your emotional well-being. And perhaps one of the greatest acts of self-respect is learning to stop chasing people who only appear when they need something from you. You do not have to earn love by overextending yourself until nothing remains. Your worth is not measured by how much pain you can absorb for others. The people who truly care about you will not make you feel invisible during your quiet moments and important only during their chaos. Real love stays connected even when there is nothing to take. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. It settles quietly inside the soul after giving too much of yourself to people who only know how to take. At first, you may not even notice it happening. You continue smiling, continue helping, continue showing up for everyone around you while ignoring the growing heaviness in your own heart. But emotional draining rarely arrives like a storm. It comes like slow rain, falling day after day until the spirit begins to drown beneath invisible weight. Some people enter your life carrying endless needs but very little concern for what their presence costs you emotionally. Every conversation becomes about their problems. Every interaction revolves around their feelings, their struggles, their crises. And because you are compassionate, you listen, you comfort, you encourage, you become a place where they unload every fear and frustration. But somewhere along the way, your own emotions become neglected. Your pain waits quietly in the background while you keep tending to everyone else's wounds. The painful truth about emotional exhaustion is that it often disguises itself as love and loyalty. You tell yourself you are simply being supportive. You convince yourself that caring deeply means sacrificing endlessly. Yet real love does not leave one person emotionally starving while the other is constantly fed. Healthy relationships create balance. They allow both people to feel heard, valued, and emotionally safe. But when someone only takes from your energy without replenishing it, the relationship slowly begins to consume your peace. There are moments when emotionally drained people begin losing pieces of themselves without realizing it. They stop enjoying the things that once brought them happiness. Their mind grows tired, their patience weakens. Even silence no longer feels restful because their spirit has carried too much for too long. And often, the saddest part is that the people causing the exhaustion remain completely unaware or unconcerned. They become so accustomed to your strength that they forget you also need care, understanding, and support. One of the clearest signs of emotional draining is how your body reacts around certain people. Your energy disappears after speaking with them. Your chest feels heavy before answering their calls. You feel anxiety instead of comfort when their name appears on your screen. These reactions are not weakness. The body often recognizes emotional imbalance long before the mind fully accepts it. A peaceful relationship should not constantly leave you feeling depleted, tense, or emotionally responsible for another person's entire existence. Emotionally draining people also have a way of making you feel guilty for protecting yourself. The moment you ask for space, they accuse you of changing. The moment you set boundaries, they act wounded or disappointed. This creates a painful cycle where you continue overgiving simply to avoid conflict or guilt. But no relationship should require the destruction of your mental and emotional well-being in order to survive. There comes a time when you must ask yourself an important question: who pours back into you? Who listens when your heart grows tired? Who notices your silence, your sadness, your emotional fatigue? Because even the strongest souls need rest. Even the kindest hearts deserve support. You were never meant to carry everyone while abandoning yourself in the process. Protecting your peace is not cruelty. Stepping away from emotional exhaustion is not selfishness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is recognize when your kindness has become a source of constant depletion. And the moment you stop allowing others to drain the life from your spirit, you begin rediscovering the strength, clarity, and peace that were buried beneath the weight of giving too much for far too long. One of the most painful truths a person can experience is discovering that the respect they received was never truly respect at all. It was appreciation for what they provided. As long as you kept giving your time, your energy, your patience, your loyalty, and your sacrifice, people smiled at you warmly. They praised your kindness. They called you important. They made you feel valued. But the moment you began protecting your peace, the atmosphere changed. Suddenly, the same people who once celebrated your generosity began questioning your character simply because you stopped overextending yourself for their comfort. There are relationships built not on love, but on access. Access to your support, access to your emotional labor, access to your willingness to carry burdens that never belonged to you. And when that access is interrupted, hidden attitudes reveal themselves quickly. People who truly respect you will still honor your boundaries, even when those boundaries inconvenience them. But people who benefited from your constant giving often become frustrated the moment you decide to prioritize your own well-being. Sometimes all it takes is one simple word to expose everything: no. The people who only valued your usefulness often struggle deeply with hearing it, not because the request was important, but because your refusal reminds them they are no longer in control of your generosity. They may call you selfish after years of selflessness. They may accuse you of changing when in reality you are simply becoming healthier. And this is where many kind-hearted people become trapped. They feel guilty for choosing themselves because they have been conditioned to believe their worth depends on endless sacrifice. But real respect does not disappear when you become unavailable. Genuine people do not punish you for being tired, overwhelmed, or human. They understand that your value is not tied to how much you can give them. They recognize that even the strongest hearts need rest. Anyone who becomes angry when you establish boundaries was likely benefiting from your lack of them. There is also a quiet manipulation that happens when people grow accustomed to your constant giving. They stop asking with gratitude and start expecting with entitlement. Your efforts become invisible because they are seen as normal. The sacrifices you make no longer surprise them because they assume you will always continue giving no matter the cost to yourself. And when generosity becomes expected instead of appreciated, resentment slowly begins growing inside the soul. Many people stay trapped in these situations because they fear losing connection. They worry that if they stop giving so much, they will lose love, friendship, or acceptance. But a connection that survives only through your exhaustion is not a healthy connection. Love that disappears when you stop serving is not love rooted in sincerity. It is dependency disguised as affection. There comes a moment in life when you realize that constantly emptying yourself to keep others comfortable will eventually leave you emotionally bankrupt. And in that realization, something powerful begins to awaken. You stop apologizing for resting. You stop explaining every boundary. You stop feeling guilty for protecting your peace from those who only valued your usefulness. Because maturity teaches you that not everyone upset by your boundaries is actually hurt by them. Some are simply disappointed they can no longer benefit from your endless availability. And perhaps one of the greatest forms of self-respect is learning to walk away from environments where your humanity matters less than your usefulness. You deserve relationships where love remains, even when you cannot give your absolute best every moment of the day. You deserve people who still treat you with kindness when you are struggling, resting, healing, or simply saying no. Because true respect does not vanish the moment your giving slows down. Real respect sees your worth long before it sees what you can provide. There is a certain calmness in the presence of people who are genuine. You do not feel rushed around them. You do not feel pressured to constantly prove your worth or overextend your energy to be accepted. Instead, you feel seen for who you are, not for what you can provide. Genuine people do not approach your kindness as something to consume. They see it as something sacred, something to be valued, not used. When someone is truly sincere, they never confuse your kindness with obligation. They understand that your goodness is a choice, not a duty. They do not expect you to be endlessly available, endlessly strong, or endlessly giving. And because of that understanding, they treat your presence with care. They do not take your support for granted because they know it comes from the heart, not from pressure. In their eyes, your kindness is not a resource to drain, but a gift to respect. A genuine person never feels the need to exploit what is soft in you. Instead, they protect it. They notice when you are tired. They recognize when your silence carries weight. They do not wait for you to break down before offering support. And most importantly, they do not benefit from your exhaustion. They would rather see you rested than relied upon beyond your limits. That is the difference between someone who values you and someone who uses you. Exploitation often begins where empathy is absent. People who use others tend to focus only on what they can receive. They may appear charming, attentive, even caring at first, but over time their pattern reveals itself. They take without balance, they ask without consideration, they expect without gratitude, and slowly you begin to notice that your kindness becomes one-sided. But genuine people interrupt that pattern naturally. They give back, they reciprocate, they show up not because they need something, but because they value connection. There is no confusion in relationships with sincere individuals. You are not left questioning your importance. You are not made to feel guilty for setting boundaries. You are not punished for having limits. Instead, you are respected in your wholeness, including your tiredness, your vulnerability, and even your silence. Genuine people do not require you to constantly perform emotional labor to earn their presence. They are present because they care, not because they benefit. One of the most beautiful signs of authenticity is consistency. Genuine people do not only appear in moments where life is easy or when they need something from you. They remain steady even when nothing is being exchanged. They check on you without motive. They listen without agenda. They appreciate you without conditions. And in that consistency, your spirit feels safe, not used. When kindness is placed in the hands of someone genuine, it grows. It does not shrink under pressure. It does not become a burden. Instead, it becomes mutual. There is a flow between both hearts, not a drain from one to another. And that balance is what makes those relationships feel peaceful rather than exhausting. Over time, you begin to realize something important. The people who truly value you never make you feel like you must earn your right to exist in their lives through constant giving. They accept you even when you are not at your strongest. They respect you even when you are not available. And they love you in a way that does not demand depletion. And perhaps the deepest truth is this: genuine people do not exploit your kindness because they understand something simple but powerful. Your kindness was never meant to be consumed. It was meant to be honored. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must learn that saying no is not a rejection of love, but a return to self-respect. For many, this realization arrives late, after years of overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending themselves for people who never once questioned whether they were asking for too much. Boundaries, in their purest form, are not walls built to shut others out. They are doors with locks that remind you that access to your time, energy, and heart is something sacred, not something automatic. At first, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, almost unnatural, especially for those who have been conditioned to please, to adapt, and to avoid conflict at all costs. There is a quiet fear that if you stop being endlessly available, you will become less lovable. That fear keeps many people trapped in cycles of exhaustion, where they continue giving far beyond their limits just to maintain peace with others, while silently losing peace within themselves. But real peace does not come from being constantly agreeable. It comes from being honest, even when honesty disrupts expectations. When you begin to set boundaries, you may notice a shift in how certain people respond to you. Some will respect you more deeply because they finally see you valuing yourself the way they should have all along, but others will resist. They may try to guilt you, question you, or make you feel as though you are changing in a negative way. In truth, what is changing is not your kindness, but your availability for misuse. And that change often reveals who was truly connected to you and who was simply comfortable with your lack of limits. Guilt is one of the strongest chains used to keep compassionate people bound to unhealthy dynamics. It whispers that choosing yourself is selfish. It insists that resting is laziness. It suggests that protecting your energy is abandonment. But guilt is not always a reflection of wrongdoing. Sometimes it is just the discomfort of breaking patterns that once kept everyone else comfortable at your expense. Learning to recognize this difference is where emotional freedom begins. A healthy boundary does not require aggression. It does not need cruelty or hostility to be effective. Sometimes it is simply a calm refusal, a quiet step back, a gentle but firm decision to no longer participate in what drains you. And surprisingly, the more consistently you honor those boundaries, the more clarity you gain about your relationships. You begin to see who respects your limits without resentment, and who only respected you when there were no limits at all. There is a deep strength in choosing yourself without apology. Not because you no longer care for others, but because you finally understand that care without self-respect leads to self-destruction. You cannot pour endlessly into others while ignoring your own emptiness. At some point, survival requires balance, and balance begins the moment you realize that your needs are not less important than anyone else's. Boundaries also teach people how to treat you. When you stop accepting disrespect, inconsistency, or emotional draining, you are silently teaching others what is no longer acceptable in your life. And while some may leave, the ones who remain will often be those who genuinely value you, not just what you provide.